November is my planning month for the next year, for 2021. So I can set some intention professionally and personally. What about you? When do you start planning to be intentional about your life? We're going to talk about that, and we're going to answer some of your listener questions today on the Retirement Answer Man Show. Hey, welcome to the show. My name is Roger Whitney. Hey, Sherlock. The dog just walked in to say hi to me. This is the show dedicated to helping you not just survive, but rock retirement. And last week, we had a Live with Roger session on unexpected retirement. I was pretty blown away. We had almost 500 people register, and we had about 400 people live, where we spent an hour and 20 minutes, going over how do you navigate unexpected retirements. And we hung out and answered listener questions for a good period of time. We're going to do those about every other month or so going forward, just to have a hangout. It's not going to be an official teaching, although I will be teaching. A lot of it's going to be just chatting and answering questions and helping each other navigate what always seems like a crazy world. And so you can learn more about all of those at livewithroger.com. I think we already have the results webinar registration up there for January, which brings me to the next subject. In January, we are doing Retirement Plan Live. And if you haven't seen this before, you can go back in the archives or see the results webinars on our website, rogerwhitney.com, where we select a listener and we walk through building a retirement plan step by step on the podcast. You get to listen to me and this individual just chatting about framing in their situation. And then in the results webinar, we all get to go on live. We present the analysis and talk about some risks and opportunities for them to improve their plan. So this is going to be pretty fun. I don't know if we've done one this year yet or not. So we are looking for candidates, and we're looking for candidates that are dealing with an unexpected retirement, either voluntary, they got a package that accelerated their plans, or involuntary. And if you think this might fit you and you want to raise your hand just to have a quick chat about it, you're not committing to anything, you can go to rogerwhitney.com/RPL. So if you want to raise your hand, go there and maybe we'll get a chance to chat. Now let's go talk about intention.
Huh? What does that mean?
Intention. Done on purpose, deliberate. I'm thinking back to early in life. So many things weren't very intentional. I guess going to Michigan State was, in the sense that I intended to go to a Big Ten school, but I chose Michigan State because my buddy was going there and it was far enough away. When I moved to Texas, I knew I wanted to be out of Michigan. That was intentional, but Texas ended up being the place because that's where my girlfriend was going. And we were already on the way to getting engaged. I think about this, and this is weird. It went a long time ago. Getting into this business of financial advice was not intentional. My degree was in international relations, Asian studies focus. My intention was to go to China back in the early 90s. And then I met a girl and life changed. And when I became a financial advisor, right before that, I was working at Radio Shack. Remember Radio Shack? I think they're still around, a few of them. And I was negotiating real estate leases. I was doing all right, but I didn't really love it. And I had a buddy in this business, and I'm like, he loved it. And I'm like, okay, I'll try that. That was my intention in getting into this business. But intention is done on purpose or deliberate. And as I've gotten older and matured, I've tried to be much more intentional. And I wonder if that has to do with time. When you're young, time is plentiful. You don't really think of it as a finite asset or resource. Starting this podcast had to do with the constraint of time and thinking of, wow, 20 years from now, if I continue on this course, I'll be fine, but what could I have done? That was a lot of what drove the show. So starting the show was part of the intention to discover what I'm supposed to be doing and how I bring glory to God and all sorts of things. So that became intentional, but it all focused on the time constraint. That really brought intention to the front and center for me anyway. So November, the reason we do Q&A in November is this is when I set my intention for 2021. So I'll give you an idea on the show. You should see this mind map that I have that outlines not just the intention for the show, but the intention for the Rock Retirement Club. So January, we're doing Retirement Plan Live. February, the theme of the show will be how to stay fit and healthy in retirement. March is going to be what should I be doing if I'm within 5 years of retirement? What you should focus on. April is going to be understanding choosing investment vehicles. May is going to be creating your non-financial plan. June is going to be choosing your Social Security strategy. And then we can go down the list. I got it all the way out to December of 2021. That is my intention. And just like this year, every now and then I'll pivot. And that's okay. Pivoting away from intention is totally cool. But I have intention. I'm trying to be deliberate. I was having a conversation with a member of the club recently who is overfunded. They got more than enough money just through pensions and Social Security, and they live a great life without spending a lot. And they had an account that was designed for them to spend because they have a hard time being intentional about spending money because it's just not in their nature. They're mid-60s. And so we were noodling on how do we get over that inability to take action on that intention? Because it was sitting there, and that was the intention of putting it there. I came up with two ideas. One I thought was awesome. The other one was good too. They only took advantage of the latter. And that was to label that account as their play money. So-and-so's play money. Or you could label it, make sure you spend this money. Because sometimes if it's just sitting there and we see it, we mentally account for it in different ways. So if we can account for it as if we've already spent it, it eases the resistance to do that because we set a future intention in order to do that. A good example personally is when I set goals, and I usually set them quarterly to semi-annually, and I hit them, I always put in the reward if I hit the goal. And so we just released Module 7 in the course, which is a big section because it is the culmination of all the other modules because it's where the students calculate their fundedness ratio. Do they have enough money? How much can they spend in retirement? That's what this module helps them answer. So that's a big course, and it's been a long journey that will continue to go on. The next module, which I'm already working on, is how do I negotiate with myself to improve that plan, either shore up some risks or take advantage of some opportunities based on all these decisions we have to make. So that was a big goal to get that out. And my intention was to buy myself a nice fountain pen when I released it. So this weekend I was looking at fountain pens online and I already had an idea of what I was thinking of. But historically, when I've set these rewards for goals, I tend to not do the reward, even though that's my intention. It just seems a little self-indulgent and I don't know. I just don't. I can't get myself to spend the money because it seems frivolous. Spending money on a fountain pen, I mean, it's not cheap. Not the ones I buy anyway. And it was hard. So I did buy it this weekend. For you fountain pen aficionados, it was a Sailor Pro Gear with a medium tip. It was orange and it's on its way. But it was hard to spend the money because it was not inexpensive. It wasn't crazy. But sometimes we have a hard time taking action on our intention. So the first idea I had given to this RRC members, I said, okay, do this. I said, go get your checkbook. And they said, now take out 12 checks, date each one for the beginning of each month of 2021, write out the amount for $1,000 and sign your name. They're listening. They're wondering what I'm talking about. Now, at the end of every month, if you don't spend part of your play money, I want you to put my name in the pay to the order of and send me that check for $1,000. And then they started laughing. I thought it was a brilliant idea. And I said, now, if you do spend the money, I want you to send me a video of you creatively burning the check, slicing and dicing the check, and laughing that I don't get that $1,000 from you. Now, obviously, I was joking, but you know what? I bet it would work. So my question for you, now that we're in November, regardless of what's happening in the world, even if you're going through some troubled times right now, start to set some intention for 2021 of what you want to make it. Now let's go answer some of your listener questions. And here we are in our question and answer month of answering your questions, which we're excited about. We get so many. You can ask your question where, Nicole?
RogerWhitney.com/AskRoger. And bonus points for voice questions.
Yeah, we haven't got those in a while. We'll do our best to try to get them on the show. We get a lot, and they're great questions, and I appreciate them all. We'll do our best to try to answer them. And so our first question is from...
I think Lyra. That's how I'm going to pronounce that. I'm not sure if it's Lyra or Lyra. Hopefully I'm pronouncing it correctly. She writes in, "Hi, Roger. My question concerns enjoying the only life we have today while responsibly saving for retirement. We are in the constrained category. We have a few levers we can pull, and with those, I'm almost sure we will be adequately funded later. We're afraid to spend on the big ticket items, and we're curtailing life now. And even when we do decide to spend money, we can't fully enjoy it because we're unsure it won't affect us later. How do you handle this? Is there a way to map out how much of our income needs to be saved or invested and how much of it we could safely spend? We want to enjoy life now, but there's always the question of the future. We're in our 60s and plan to retire at 70, so there's not a lot of time to correct. Thank you."
Lyra, is that what we decided on?
I'm going with that.
Okay, yes. Lyra, if we're pronouncing incorrectly, it's Nicole's fault. First off, you're never going to feel okay from a we have enough standpoint. I think that's somewhat the human condition. I deal with this with clients and people in the Rock Retirement Club that clearly have enough and are overfunded. They struggle with the same things. And that's not an easy answer, but I think it's part of human nature, and I think it's okay. It's funny because you put in that you're in your 60s, and I was thinking of someone younger until I read that. And, I think of Nicole and Clay, and they're young and they have kids and they're trying to save for college and retirement and still pay for life and have fun today. And I think the way retirement is framed is detrimental to having a good life, because retirement is framed as this big march of saving and investing and denying yourself up this huge mountain in order to hit a number that will sustain you for the rest of your life when you retire. And so you're like marching up Mount Everest, suffering and denying yourself warmth and comfort in order to get to the peak with the goal, supposedly what you see on all the retirement brochures. And I think that's a horrible way to think about financial planning and retirement planning, because it makes you sacrifice so much, because most of us don't have pensions. Most of us are going to live longer than historical. The numbers generally don't work out perfectly where we're all overfunded. So I think first off, Lyra, I would suggest that you change the mindset a little bit from, rather than trying to march to a destination of retirement, think of it like a journey that should be enjoyed all along the way. So you're not suffering so much, but you're also acknowledging that the journey never really ends. I think that's a much healthier way to think about this, because tomorrow's promised to no one. And so when you think of these bigger ticket items, and this is exactly how we do it in the masterclass in the course, which we walk people through in the club, is when you think of your spending, here's a frame to start to model this. Number one, think of your spending and divide your spending, or define it between your needs. What are the base needs that you and your husband need to have a good life? So that's going to be obviously all the basic needs of housing and utilities and healthcare and all that other stuff, but also throw in eating out once a week, light travel, etc. Define what your base needs are, and then define what the wants are, what the sauce is on your life that gives it some flavor, but they're more discretionary. And then define what your wishes are, those aspirational things. And I would define your spending between those three tranches or tiers. And then secondly, map out your cash flow. And you can do this on a spreadsheet. The new retirement calculator, which we have in the Rock Retirement Club, or the course has its own spreadsheet. Map out your cash flow from, okay, what are we going to receive from income? Social Security, pensions in the form of social capital, your earnings, human capital. And so you can isolate year by year. You're in your 60s. So say over the next 10 to 20 years, you can do it on a spreadsheet if you'd like. Isolate the estimated amount that you're going to need from your actual savings, your money, your financial capital. And that will start to frame it for you. And then in the course, what we do is we define our fundedness ratio based on our needs only, our needs and our wants, and our needs, wants, and wishes. I don't know. Constrained for needs, wants, and wishes is fine. And sometimes we put them all together that way rather than dividing them out. So we treat them with similar importance, because what we would like to have is our needs as a slam dunk. That's the last tranche we don't ever want to lose. But then our needs and our wants and our needs, wants, and wishes end up becoming a year by year decision. But if you map this out in either a calculator or in the spreadsheet like that we use in the master class, then you can make a year by year decision. If I do this today, what will it force me to do later on? Because maybe you plan on working beyond 70, but at a much slower pace in order to get some of those big ticket items now. It's not an easy answer. It'll go from clear as mud to foggy. It will never be crystal clear. But I think if you can be agile in those extraordinary spending decisions so you don't put into jeopardy that base needs life, that good life that you never want to put into jeopardy, then you can make year by year decisions on the wants and the wishes.
Our next question is from Mark. He says, love your show. I will be starting to receive my pension in about 6 months, and I have to elect whether to take the full payment or select a lesser amount with a survivor benefit. I have a life insurance policy, and my original thinking was to take the full pension and use the life insurance policy as the benefit to my wife as the survivor, assuming she will have a longer life. My life insurance would provide about 8 years worth of survivor benefits. What's the best way for me to analyze this strategy? Thank you.
Hey, Mark, how are you doing? It's a good question. And life insurance is a adequate tool at times for covering the extra, that gap between life only and joint life. The way I would go about thinking through this question, Mark, is one, listen to what we just talked with Lyra in terms of you want to frame it that way and build your model. And then you can play with, well, what if I take joint life? How does this model work from a fundedness standpoint? And then model life only, and then test your premature death. You can test it immediately, right? Say, okay, well, what if my wife is by herself immediately and this payment goes away and this insurance comes in? How does this all work in that what if scenario? Then you can test, well, what happens if it's 10 years from now? And then you can start to look at them side by side. And that's one reason why you want to build this wireframe to begin with, because you want to have the core wireframe, and then you can create alternate scenarios to see how it changes all the numbers. So for example, one what if might be, well, what if I take the life only, but I delay my Social Security to age 70, so there's a higher survivor benefit, right? Because there's multiple levers we have here. One lever that we forget, Mark, when we're doing these kind of scenarios is adjusting spending for the surviving spouse. So let's say the two of you are going to spend $150,000 a year for your needs, wants, and wishes. Well, if one of you passes, that spending is going to change. We're not going to need the car for the other spouse. The travel will be different. The normal daily spending will be different. And another thing that we forget when we're making these adjustments are, if my wife passed, I probably wouldn't keep this house. I would downsize at some point, which would bring more money back into my financial assets. And those are the things that we forget to adjust when we're evaluating these types of things. So I would suggest creating the wireframe like we talked above. Plenty of online calculators that can help you start to do that. And obviously the course in the Rock Retirement Club and the calculator we use can help you there. But the key is to look at them side by side rather than think of the one individual decision, because there might be more levers than you realize.
So we have another question also from Mark. I think it's a different Mark. It's about some Social Security mechanics. He writes, my wife is 2 years older than me, and based on projected Social Security benefits, she would benefit from receiving 50% of my Social Security benefits versus her own. As I understand, she's eligible for this enhanced benefit when I reach full retirement age. Does her eligibility for this increased benefit depend on me drawing my Social Security benefits at full retirement age, since I'm considering delaying drawing benefits until I'm 70? If her eligibility depends on me activating Social Security at 66 versus 70, this substantially changes the break-even age in the calculation. Likewise, does this increase in her benefits automatically occur, or do we need to notify Social Security of her eligibility? Thanks.
Hey, Mark. And I always refer to decision trees, and we have a lot of decision trees that walk us through these scenarios because they get complicated. You can't keep all this stuff in your head. Few people can. So, spousal benefits. So, a husband and wife each have their own earnings record, and they can file on their earnings record whenever they'd like after 62, right? And they're going to earn their Social Security benefit on their earnings record. But there's also this spousal benefit, which will give either spouse 50% of what the other's earnings record is. Usually it's whichever one is higher. So a spousal benefit, in order for that to take effect, the other spouse has to file for their benefits. So in this scenario, Mark, she can't claim a spousal benefit until you file for Social Security. So if you delay, she's not going to get a spousal benefit until you file. What you can do is, one strategy is she can file on her own benefit at 62 or beyond and receive her own benefit at, say, full retirement age and get that income coming in. And then once you file for your Social Security, whether it's at full retirement or somewhere in between there and 70, then her benefit will automatically step up to whichever is higher, 50% of yours or her own benefit. And that should happen automatically, but I would check it and make sure it does. If you want her to receive the spousal benefit, it's going to have to happen when you retire or when you file for benefits. Now, as a side note on that, Mark, the traditional way to look at this is this break-even point, which is when do you become whole if you delay and so forth. And what's interesting is statistically, whether you take it at 62 or take it at age 70, the Social Security Administration calculates that it should all even out if you live to the quote unquote life expectancy. So it's supposed to even out. I'm not a huge fan of the break-even point because it ignores really the bigger benefit of Social Security, which is what its real role is, which is longevity insurance. Because this is a guaranteed payment that will increase by inflation that will not end until the last person passes. So you waiting to 70 may kill your break-even point, but that could give a much higher benefit for the person who's likely going to live the longest that will increase by inflation over time. And that's actually what, in my mind, is the key role of Social Security. This is your longevity insurance. So from that perspective, the break-even point's not quite as important as we think it is. Hope that helps, Mark number 2. You're not number 2, though. You're both number 1. Right, Nicole?
It could be the same guy. I'm not really sure.
I don't know either.
I don't have email addresses on here. Julie writes in and asks, my husband and I are retired and 67 years old. We have chosen to have a 5-year income cushion in cash. This is a large sum of money. We're looking for a safe investment with at least some return. What would you suggest?
I'm sorry, Julie. There's really no good answers. And where can you get a safe return? At least some return. Would have been better than a laugh. It's not easy.
You're so cruel. What?
It's not easy. I'm not laughing at her. I'm laughing at, returns. Where can we get safe returns?
Yes, because interest rates are...
Womp womp. I mean, even last year, I think the highest yielding money market in the country was almost 2%. And we thought that was crazy low. And I looked the other day and they're like, the highest one I found was like 50 basis points or 0.5% within a year. Bam. So I feel your pain, Julie. So here are some options. Obviously, high yield money market accounts, and generally the online banks consistently have better rates on high yield money markets because traditional banks are going to be basically zero. Whereas I said you can get up to about 0.5% in online money markets. CDs, which are horrible too. In fact, let me pull up CD rates right now. So this is as of 10/29. A 12-month CD is 65 basis points. A 18-month CD is 70 basis points. A 3-year CD is 0.75%. A 5-year CD is 1%. And this is from one of the online banks. That doesn't sound like much, and it's not. So the question is, where else can you go? Well, you could go to individual bond if you're building an income floor and you need this money to pay out on particular years, but you're not going to get much better than that. And so we're talking a matter of inches here, Julie. Probably the one thing that people don't consider that is a possible, especially if you have an IRA account, is a MYGA, a multi-year guaranteed annuity, which is the last one I did with a client, which is very recent, was about 2.4%. I forget if it was a 3 or a 4-year fixed annuity. That's substantially different, right? That's a huge jump from 0.75%. And so you can look at multi-year guaranteed annuities, which, let me explain what these are real briefly. It's a fixed annuity. I put my dollar in, I get the interest rate yield, and at the end of the contract, I can take my money back and there's no penalties and there's no fancy stuff. That yield is baked into the cost of it, so there's no hidden fees if it's clean. The difficulty with doing these, it doesn't sit in your bank account. You got to fill out a bunch of contracts. It's just the friction of having to do it and then having the money go somewhere else and then monitoring it and then bringing it back 2-3 years later. But the yields are substantially higher. And when a client and I were considering this a month or two ago, the way I equated it, Julie, and this is one way you can think about this. If it's 5-year income floor, if you map out how much you need each individual year, then you can isolate when you need to have this money due. So what we did with this client is in year 3, 4, and 5, we identified how much they needed each year. And then I calculated option 1, we do just CD rates or a money market. And this is what the yield would be over the 3 to 4 to 5 years for this amount of money. And then I showed them what it would be if we were willing to do the paperwork for these MYGAs, these fixed annuities. And we looked at the dollar cost difference. And the way I framed it with them, by the way, I don't even sell these type of things. I don't have my insurance licenses. I'm just looking for yield like you, Julie. And the way I framed it, when we saw the difference in yield in this particular case, it was, I want to say $14,000. And so the question became, are we willing to have a little bit more complexity? And are we willing to do, let's say, 6 or 7 hours of paperwork?
Ooh.
That's probably way overestimated. And then for an extra 15 grand, where does that work out dollar per hour? Then the way they framed it was, this is a trip for Europe. If I'm willing to do this, have a little bit more complexity and do all this paperwork, I could essentially pay for a trip to Europe. That's how they thought of it. But those are things to consider. I tend to do them in IRAs because I don't have to worry about taxes so much because it's already pre-tax money. But there's some ideas for you, Julie. The only caution I would give you is, don't try to get fancy for yield. There's a lot of things that will try to attract you to get fancy for yield. And this is your income floor. You need to have this money. This is going to allow you to have the rest of your assets invested more long-term. And that's where your return will come from. So hopefully that helps. And I wasn't laughing at you, by the way.
Our next question is from David on portfolio advice. How can I get good advice regarding my retirement portfolio without turning it over to a manager? I prefer to manage it myself, but I would like a second set of eyes on it occasionally to make sure I'm not missing something or making an avoidable mistake. All the planners I've spoken with want me to let them manage my assets for an ongoing percentage. Is there an option to just pay a reasonable fee for an occasional professional review of my situation?
Sure there is. There are a lot of flat fee advisors out there that will charge a flat fee for a scope of work. And there are even hourly advisors out there, certified financial planners, that will charge an hourly fee to review it. And I think you just need to Google those sources and then evaluate what the scope of work is. The flat fee advisor is going to have a set hard dollar amount. And then you just want to make sure that the scope of work is really defined of what they're going to do for you. The hourly is sort of like going to a CPA or attorney. It's sort of open-ended. You don't know how long it's going to take, although they can give you an estimate of the hours. And I think the key here is, David, when you're thinking of just portfolio review, portfolio management isn't difficult. There are plenty of models out there that you can mimic to target a risk profile. that don't have to get too fancy. So actually, it's pretty simple on the portfolio allocation end of it. Where it gets complicated usually is the humanness of trying to overcomplicate it or overthink it as life unfolds. A good example is just with the election we just had of people, I'm sticking to my long-term portfolio that I have reasonably thought out, but we have COVID in this election and then messing with it. That's usually where portfolio management falls apart. And that's one reason why I think the pie cake structure helps, because it allows the long-term to be truly long-term. But yeah, you can just Google flat fee advisor or hourly financial planner, and you should be able to find a list that you can start doing some due diligence.
That's all I've got for today.
All right, so let's set a SMART sprint.
On your marks, get set.
And we're off to set a baby step that we can take in 7 days to rock life and retirement. After years, Nicole, I think we have that down. That little intro.
Success achieved in 2020.
So to continue to play off David's question on portfolio advice, one simple thing you can do, and this is a good time of year to do it, is to look at your investment assets, assuming they're funds or ETFs, go to their websites and see if they are giving you estimated distributions for capital gains and dividends. Because each year, especially mutual funds, they're going to issue out capital gains or distributions and dividend distributions that they've accumulated throughout the year. And that's going to be a tax consequence to you. So now is your time to start doing portfolio management from the tax management end of it and get an idea of what these distributions might be so you can prepare for them tax-wise, but also so you can figure out how you address these before the end of the year, neutralize any gains or dividends by some strategies that we'll talk about in future Smart Sprints. Nicole, are you excited about Thanksgiving coming up in 2 weeks?
Yes. I actually, when we're recording this, I don't know what our Thanksgiving plans are going to be this year. So that'll be interesting to see how everything shakes out.
We have a lot to be thankful for. So hopefully, regardless of how it shakes out.
Yes, regardless of how it shakes out, we have a lot to be thankful for. Are you guys going to have a get together or do anything?
Oh, yes. Because our back overhang is finally finished.
That's right. You can have a beautiful outdoor Thanksgiving.
Shauna is building the table.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, she's building the table. We went and bought the wood yesterday, and I'm like the muscle, Nicole. I have to move the wood, and then she does everything because she's very handy. So I just pray for great weather because she has it in her mind's eye of having Thanksgiving dinner outside under this overhang with the fire and everything else. So
that's always a gamble in Texas.
It could be ice or it could be 90.
Anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
So next week we'll have to talk a little bit about thankfulness because it's an important thing right now. And it always is. Anyway. All right, Nicole. Hey, you. Thank you for listening. We love chatting with you every week, and I hope you have a great day. Hey, it's time for that all-important disclaimer. We so appreciate you listening to the show and love your questions and love the teaching that we're able to provide here. And actually, it helps us too. But remember, you're not our clients.
Not love it if you took advice from us on the show.
We would not love it if you took advice from us on the show. Realize this is helpful in education. Talk to your legal advisor, your tax advisor, or your financial advisor before you make any decisions.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.